on Brazil. I just don't have them at hand. If you forgive me, we can provide them afterwards. But the point you raise around the effects of this disease in indigenous peoples is real. I think the Mayor referred similarly to issues around ethnicity. There are definite ways in which this virus may be differentially affecting certain groups, but it's most certain that the outcomes for these groups are very different. Whether or not ethnicity or your genetic makeup makes you more susceptible to disease is still in question. But what's not in question, I believe, is that if you, because of your ethnicity, because you're an indigenous person, if you are living in poverty, if you've lived for years without access to adequate health care, if you've got underlying conditions like diabetes or hypertension because of lifestyle issues that have been induced by poverty and by lifestyle, then the outcomes in this disease are much, much worse. And the access to health services is much slower, much later, and very often not at the same level of sophistication. So there is no question of that. There are maybe two groups of indigenous peoples that we look at. One are groups who are living in their traditional environments, be it in the Amazon rainforest or in other situations. And then there is probably an even greater number of people who come from indigenous backgrounds who live very often in peri-urban, poor situations, and they suffer very much the same diseases and the same vulnerabilities as the urban poor in general. And in many countries, indigenous people make up a disproportionate number of people living in situations of poor access because of poverty, because of lack of access, and frankly because of racism. So I think the trick here is really creating access for everyone to health services now to save lives, and doing something much more systematic in the long term, which is the greater challenge, and that is how do we reduce these differences and how do we get rid of the inequities that exist over long periods of time that ultimately result in these poor outcomes when we're hit with diseases like COVID-19.
All right, our next question is Antonio Broto. Antonio, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Okay, so I have two questions, but one of them is really short.